The political temperature between the United States and Canada just surged, and the latest exchange between former US President Donald Trump and Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney is sending shockwaves through diplomatic and economic circles. What started as a tense policy disagreement has quickly escalated into a dramatic standoff that many analysts say could reshape North American relations. In a moment that caught political observers off guard, Trump appeared visibly frustrated after Carney's government rejected a proposed round of negotiations tied to trade and economic policy. The move by Ottawa was not just a simple no, it was a firm statement that Canada would not be pressured into talks under terms it considers unfair or politically motivated. The tension reportedly began when Trump publicly pushed for new discussions involving trade adjustments that critics say heavily favored the United States. Trump's team framed the proposal as an opportunity to rebalance economic relationships and protect American industries. However, Canadian officials viewed the demand as aggressive and unnecessary, especially given the existing framework under the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement commonly known as the USMCA. Instead of agreeing to the meeting, Carney's administration delivered a sharp response. Officials said Canada would only enter negotiations that respect the current trade agreement and international economic norms. Behind the scenes, sources in Ottawa indicated that the government believed the request was less about policy and more about political theatre. Trump didn't take the rejection quietly. Within hours of the announcement, the former president took to social media and campaign-style appearances to criticize Canada's decision. He accused the Canadian government of taking advantage of the United States and suggested that America had the leverage to force concessions if necessary. His remarks quickly circulated across political media, fueling speculation that this could become a major talking point in upcoming policy debates. But the reaction from Canada was swift and unusually direct. Carney's office released a statement emphasizing that Canada would not negotiate under threats or pressure. The message was clear. Canada sees itself as an equal partner, not a subordinate in North American trade. Canadian officials also reminded the public that the current trade framework was negotiated in good faith and already provides mechanisms for resolving disputes. This firm stance was interpreted by some analysts as Canada drawing a line in the sand. For decades, the relationship between the United States and Canada has been one of the closest economic partnerships in the world. Every day, billions of dollars in goods cross the border, supporting industries ranging from automotive manufacturing to agriculture and energy. Because of this deep integration, even minor disputes can have ripple effects across both economies. That's why Carney's rejection of negotiations surprised many observers. Typically, disagreements between the two countries are handled quietly through diplomatic channels or dispute resolution panels under the USMCA. Public confrontations are relatively rare, but this time both sides appear willing to take the disagreement into the spotlight. According to insiders familiar with the situation, Canadian officials believe that accepting Trump's proposed negotiations would set a dangerous precedent. If Canada agreed to renegotiate terms whenever Washington demanded it, Ottawa could lose significant bargaining power in the future. Trump's supporters, however, see the situation very differently. They argue that the United States has long tolerated trade imbalances with Canada and that pushing for tougher negotiations is simply good economic strategy. From their perspective, Canada benefits enormously from access to American markets, and Washington has every right to demand adjustments that protect U.S. jobs. This clash of narratives has turned the issue into more than just a policy dispute. It's now a battle of political messaging. On one side, Trump portrays himself as the defender of American workers standing up to foreign governments. On the other side, Carney presents Canada as a sovereign nation refusing to be pressured by political rhetoric from Washington. The optics of the confrontation are powerful. Images of Trump criticizing Canada during rallies and interviews contrast sharply with Carney's calm but firm tone in official statements. The difference in style highlights the broader contrast between their political approaches. Trump tends to escalate conflicts publicly, using dramatic language and bold accusations to rally supporters. Carney, a former central banker known for his technocratic background, prefers measured statements focused on economic stability and international cooperation. That contrast is shaping how the story is being interpreted around the world. International observers are watching closely because the United States and Canada play critical roles in global supply chains. Any disruption to their economic partnership could affect industries far beyond North America. For example, the automotive sector relies heavily on cross-border production. A single vehicle assembled in North America may contain parts that cross the US-Canada border multiple times during manufacturing. If political tensions lead to tariffs or regulatory barriers, the entire system could face delays and rising costs. Energy markets could also be affected. Canada is one of the largest suppliers of oil and electricity to the United States. Any policy changes tied to trade negotiations could alter how these resources move across the border, potentially impacting prices and supply stability. Despite the heated rhetoric, some experts believe the standoff may ultimately lead to quiet negotiations behind the scenes. Diplomatic history shows that public disputes often mask ongoing private discussions. Governments sometimes take tough positions publicly to strengthen their leverage while still exploring compromise through back-channel talks. But even if negotiations eventually resume, the current exchange has already changed the political dynamic. Carney's refusal to immediately engage sends a message that Canada is willing to stand its ground, even when facing pressure from its largest trading partner. Trump's reaction, meanwhile, signals that he intends to keep the issue in the spotlight. The longer the standoff continues, the more it could influence domestic politics in both countries. In the United States, trade policy remains a powerful campaign issue. Politicians often use it to demonstrate their commitment to protecting American industries. Trump's criticism of Canada fits squarely into that narrative. In Canada, standing up to pressure from Washington can be politically advantageous as well. Canadian voters historically support leaders who defend national sovereignty in negotiations with larger powers. This means the dispute may persist not just because of policy differences, but because it benefits political messaging on both sides. Meanwhile, businesses and investors are watching with growing concern. Markets generally prefer stability and predictability, especially when it comes to international trade. When political leaders exchange sharp words about renegotiating agreements or imposing restrictions, companies begin to worry about future costs and supply disruptions. That uncertainty can influence investment decisions, hiring plans, and long-term economic strategies. Some industry leaders are already calling for calm. They argue that the United States and Canada have far more to gain from cooperation than confrontation. The two economies are deeply intertwined, and damaging that relationship could harm workers and businesses in both countries. Still, for now, the political drama continues to unfold. Trump shows no signs of backing down from his criticism, and Carney appears equally determined not to negotiate on terms he views as unfair. What happens next could depend on several factors. If economic pressure mounts or political incentives change, both sides may quietly move toward compromise. Alternatively, if the rhetoric continues to escalate, the dispute could evolve into a broader debate about the future of North American trade. Either way, the moment marks a significant turning point in the relationship between Washington and Ottawa. For years, their partnership has been defined by cooperation and shared interests. Now, the latest clash has exposed underlying tensions that were previously hidden beneath diplomatic language. As the situation develops, one thing is clear: the confrontation between Trump and Carney is about more than a single negotiation request. It's about power, perception, and the balance of influence between two of the world's most closely connected nations. And with both leaders digging in, the political showdown may be far from over. Yet the story didn't stop there. As the political exchange intensified, officials inside Ottawa began signaling that Canada's response was not just about rejecting a meeting, it was about redefining how Canada intends to handle pressure from Washington moving forward. Sources close to Prime Minister Mark Carney revealed that the decision to refuse negotiations was discussed internally for days before the announcement. Senior advisors reportedly warned that agreeing too quickly to demands coming from the political orbit of Donald Trump could create a perception that Canada could be pushed into talks whenever Washington raised its voice. Instead, Carney's government chose a different strategy: demonstrate calm, emphasize existing agreements, and avoid entering negotiations framed around political pressure rather than economic necessity. That strategy began unfolding immediately after Canada issued its rejection. Canadian ministers appeared on national television, repeating a consistent message: They stressed that the current framework under the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement already contains dispute mechanisms. According to them, if there are real concerns, the agreement provides a formal process to address them without dramatic political confrontations, but behind the public statements, Canadian officials were also quietly preparing for the possibility that tensions could escalate further. Economic advisors inside Ottawa began reviewing contingency plans. These included evaluating which sectors of the Canadian economy might be vulnerable if trade tensions intensified and identifying areas where Canada could apply pressure of its own if necessary. One of the key discussions reportedly focused on supply chain leverage. While the United States is Canada's largest trading partner, the relationship goes both ways. Canadian energy exports, critical minerals, agricultural products, and hydroelectric power all play essential roles in American markets. Canadian strategists know that these connections provide Ottawa with bargaining power, even when facing a much larger economy. Meanwhile, Trump's response continued to dominate political headlines across the United States. In speeches and media appearances, he framed Canada's refusal as evidence that American leaders in the past had been too soft during negotiations. He argued that a tougher approach was necessary to ensure American industries were not disadvantaged. The rhetoric energized many of his supporters, who see trade disputes as proof that Washington must constantly defend domestic manufacturing and labor interests. But not everyone in the United States agreed with the confrontational approach. Several economic analysts and former trade officials began warning that escalating tensions with Canada could be risky. They pointed out that the two countries share one of the largest and most integrated economic partnerships in the world. Every year, hundreds of billions of dollars in goods move across the border, from automobile parts to lumber, agriculture to technology components. The level of integration is so deep that even small disruptions could create ripple effects across entire industries. One example frequently mentioned by experts is the auto sector. Cars assembled in North America are rarely produced in just one country. Parts may originate in factories in Ontario, move to assembly plants in Michigan, and then cross the border again during final production stages. Any new tariffs, delays, or regulatory disputes could slow down production lines that rely on precision timing and cross-border cooperation. Energy is another critical piece of the puzzle. Canada supplies large volumes of crude oil, natural gas, and electricity to American markets. In many northern U.S. states, Canadian hydroelectric power helps stabilize energy grids and reduce costs for consumers. Any disruption in this system could trigger higher energy prices or supply concerns. Despite these risks, political messaging on both sides continued to escalate. Canadian politicians began emphasizing national independence and the importance of defending Canadian economic interests. In parliamentary discussions, several lawmakers argued that Canada must avoid being drawn into politically motivated negotiations that could weaken its negotiating position in the future. The message resonated strongly with many Canadian voters. Historically, moments when Canadian leaders stand firm against pressure from Washington often generate domestic political support. For many Canadians, maintaining sovereignty in negotiations with larger powers is a point of national pride. At the same time, some Canadian business leaders were urging caution. Executives from manufacturing associations, agricultural groups, and export organizations began quietly lobbying the government to keep diplomatic channels open. They worried that prolonged tension could eventually spill into policies that disrupt trade flows. Their message was simple: political battles may dominate headlines, but economic stability is essential for businesses on both sides of the border. Back in Washington, political strategists were also evaluating the situation through a different lens: electoral impact. Trade disputes can be powerful campaign tools. By highlighting conflicts with foreign governments, politicians can present themselves as defenders of national interests. Trump's criticism of Canada fits directly into that narrative. Political analysts noted that even if no immediate policy changes occur, the confrontation could still serve as a symbolic victory in political messaging. Meanwhile, global observers began paying closer attention. International markets tend to react quickly to signs of instability between major trading partners. Investors track these developments carefully because uncertainty in trade relationships can influence currency values, commodity prices, and investment decisions. Financial commentators noted that the US-Canada relationship has long been considered one of the most stable in the world. Any sustained tension between the two countries would be unusual and potentially significant. Behind the scenes, diplomats from both countries reportedly continued communicating through quieter channels. Even during public disagreements, governments rarely cut off contact entirely. Diplomatic teams remain in touch to prevent misunderstandings and to explore possible paths toward de-escalation. In many historical cases, dramatic public disputes eventually give way to private negotiations once political pressure begins to ease. Whether that will happen this time remains uncertain. For now, both leaders appear committed to their positions. Trump continues to portray Canada's refusal as proof that the United States must demand stronger terms in international trade. Carney, meanwhile, maintains that Canada will only engage in discussions conducted through established frameworks and mutual respect. The standoff has therefore become more than a policy disagreement. It has evolved into a broader test of political resolve. Observers say the next phase could depend on several triggers. If economic stakeholders begin pushing harder for compromise, both sides might gradually soften their positions. Alternatively, if the political benefits of confrontation remain high, the rhetoric could intensify even further. There is also the possibility that the issue could expand beyond trade. Disagreements over environmental policy, energy development, border security, or technology regulation could easily become tied into the broader debate about the future of the North American partnership. For now, the situation remains fluid. What began as a rejected negotiation request has transformed into a major political narrative that continues to grow with each statement, interview, and reaction from leaders on both sides of the border. And as the world watches closely, one question continues to hang in the air. Will this clash eventually lead to renewed cooperation between Washington and Ottawa, or will it mark the beginning of a deeper shift in how the United States and Canada navigate their complex and critical relationship in the years ahead?